Hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Calderon. I'm the lead partner of Transfer Pricing Solutions Asia, based in Singapore, looking after our firms located in the Asia Pacific region. Today, I will be talking about managing the impact of COVID-19 on transfer pricing and focusing specifically on service transactions. So let me give a brief overview of our firm. So we specialize in providing practical, proactive, and cost-effective transfer pricing advice. We are a group of advisors from Big Four and mid-tier firms based in Malaysia, Australia, and Singapore. I am the lead partner with 15 years of experience in advising multinational companies on how to manage their transfer pricing risk across a broad range of industries, business models, and transactions. So today, before I go into a couple of case studies, I will give a brief overview of IRA's guidelines on COVID-19. So IRA's released a COVID-19 guidance in September 2020 to address the impact of COVID-19 on transfer pricing and control transactions. So there are 4 changes that were addressed by the COVID-19 guidance released by IRAS. Change number 1 was the need of having a robust industry analysis that supports the evidence of the impact that COVID-19 have had in the industry of the taxpayer. And for this, it will be really important to have a reliable data that can support that impact in the industry. The second point that it addresses is the need to document the functional analysis. And for business models where there is a recharacterization of entities, they need to document the functional analysis before and after COVID-19. And also to support which entities in the group made decisions relating to the management of risk relating to COVID-19. Point number 3 was basically the recommendation of keeping evidence on both industry, functional analysis, and any other numbers that could support the impact, such as analysis between budget and actual numbers, analysis on excessive operating expenses. And number 4 was basically the changes in economic analysis, which is basically the allowing a multi-year analysis as opposed to a 1-year analysis, and compared that 3-year analysis versus the benchmarking data to make a decision whether a TP adjustment is required or not. As we can see here, this covers or the application and the examples given are very straightforward for distribution, but it doesn't address some of the key issues that we have seen in the industry for services transactions. So for that reason, we have included a couple of scenarios that could happen in the context of COVID-19 for services transaction. And particularly, I'm going to be talking about the 2 most common scenarios. Scenario number 1 being a regional head office located in Singapore that provides regional services to a company located in Malaysia and Indonesia, and it receives a service fee and that service fee is determined using a cost plus a markup. So there are 4 key issues that we have noticed or have been asked about by our clients. Issue number 1 is, can the markup be reduced? Even though the markup was agreed at a particular margin in the agreement. Point number 2 is, can the service be suspended during, for example, circuit breakers whereby maybe the regional teams couldn't provide the service? Point number 3 was or is, how do we address the benefit test when the service is being provided remotely? And issue number 4 is, can abnormal expenses be excluded? So our key tips for this type of scenarios are the following. First of all, I think a reduction of markups will be difficult if they are fixed and agree on agreements. The option of reducing the markup is possible, but it requires the change of the intercompany agreement supported by a benchmarking. Also, on suspending the services, I think is something that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And if there is enough reason to say that the service was not provided, then it has to be documented thoroughly in the transfer pricing documentation. With the evidence of benefit test, we suggest that there is a robust write-up on how the service was still being provided remotely, and a benefit was still being provided to the recipient of the service, even when the service provider was overseas. And some things that can help that argument could be things like purchase orders from the service recipient to a service provider asking for the service, evidence of emails when there was particular advice from the service provider to the service recipient, evidence of phone calls, and Zoom meetings. And last but not least, if there is abnormal expenses, it is advisable to review each of the items of the cost base and review the definition of Singapore TP guidance on operating expenses, given that some of abnormal expenses that are one-off and maybe non-operating could be categorized as non-operating and for this reason excluded from the cost base. But again, all of these tips needs to be applied on case-by-case basis. Then the second common scenario is the scenario of the limited risk service providers, where you have an entrepreneur maybe located in Singapore that has a service provider, maybe a shared service center sitting in Malaysia, company C. And that service or limited risk entity receives a service fee that is determined on a net cost plus a markup. So three key issues comes to mind when it comes to scenario 2, and that we have been receiving inquiries about. Point number one is, can markup be reduced? Can the service be suspended? Can abnormal expenses be excluded? So this is the typical scenario of limited risk entities that are being remunerated on a net cost plus, let's say, 5%. So what are our key tips on these type of entities? Similar to scenario 1, the reduction of markups will be difficult if you're doing it retroactively, because the tax authority will expect that if there is an agreed markup in the agreement, will expect the taxpayer to fulfill the obligation in the agreement. So this reduction of markups can happen, but it has to be future looking rather than retroactive looking, and it will require a change of the intercompany agreement supported by benchmarking. If the entity is categorized in the agreement as a low-risk service provider, it will be very difficult to argue that that entity needs to absorb losses. And particularly important will be the argument and the documentation around who made decisions to manage the COVID-19 risk. If this entity, like in our scenario 2, is a limited risk entity, it will be a struggle, in our view, to support the absorption of losses, especially if that entity didn't also manage any decisions around managing the COVID-19 risk. And last but not least, similar to scenario 1, if there is abnormal expenses or non-operational expenses or expenses associated that were covered by government assistance or payments, then the taxpayer will need to look item by item to make a decision of whether there is a sufficient comments and arguments to exclude some items in the cost base under the argument of being non-operational or being covered by some of the government payments that have been going around the world. So if you have any questions or you want any assistance with your service transactions and with TP documentation or TP advisory, feel free to connect with us via email, telephone number, or follow our social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website. We are always publishing blogs, webinars like this, and valuable information for you to manage your transfer pricing risk. Thank you.